Mocking her humble manner, he offered the seemingly impossible, a tango partnership resulting in certain victory. "If I tango with you," he declared confidently, "you will win." Yet the events that took place on that dance floor had the effect of silencing everyone present, and also kindled a fiery passion that would irrevocably transform their lives. Amidst the opulent luxury that dazzled all present, a hidden secret lay concealed beneath the simplicity of her uniform. His challenge to an arrogant millionaire seemed crazy. A joke that everyone expected would end in humiliation. Yet what nobody anticipated was that her courage would originate from suffering, and that her dance would be a blazing symbol of hope. The night E, which began with a brutal sporting event, would later serve as the stage for a love that would openly challenge all societal conventions. Before you get started, Olsen, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, Olsen, and comment below indicating where you're watching it from. In the comments, you'll find the Pix key for donations that help us tell more stories and help my family. I wish you a life full of blessings. Please subscribe using the button if you haven't done so yet. It's very easy. Now let us begin. Like a silent shadow, Sofia moved unnoticed among the guests at the Montenegro villa. The simplicity of her black and white uniform provided her with the camouflage of armor, rendering her almost invisible to most onlookers. To her, though, it was a ceaseless reminder of everything she had been deprived of. A mere year ago, for a party just like this one, she would definitely have chosen to wear a finely tailored dress made of silk. The objective today for her was to ensure that the champagne glasses belonging to those living her former existence always remained full. With a grace that felt utterly out of place in this setting, she served her customers. This elegance was a leftover from the refined upbringing her parents provided her before the crushing blow of bankruptcy. Their financial ruin resulted in the devastating loss of her father to a massive heart attack, and left her mother confined to bed, her health severely compromised by the combined burden of grief and overwhelming debt. She devoted every single cent of her earnings to the expensive medications and the humble clinic where her mother was receiving treatment. Nobody inside the lavishly decorated ballroom of the tycoon Iro Montenegro was aware that the girl with her head bowed down, who was adding canapes to the trays, was engaged in a quiet, desperate struggle to save the life of the person she held most dear. Her eyes wandered around the room, finally focusing on him. Alejandro Montenegro, tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his designer suit. He was the focus of all eyes, his dark hair combed meticulously back, and his eyes a deep brown shade that appeared almost black. He analyzed everything and everyone with a boredom that passed for power. With the passage of years, he had not only tripled his inherited fortune, but had also become a legendary figure in the business world, renowned for his ruthless coolness and exceptionally strategic mind. He didn't have friends, only allies. He didn't have lovers, only temporary distractions. That night, Isabella Vasconcelos, a sociologist whose skill as a teacher was matched only by her beauty, served as his distraction. With an irrepressible giggle, Isabella held onto his arm as she responded to his comment about her attire. That red dress, it simply clings to her body like a second skin. In Sofia's heart, a flicker of contempt arose. It wasn't the wealth itself that bothered her. She was already quite familiar with the extravagant lifestyle, but rather the blatant arrogance of Alejandro and his circle. They seemed to float above the ordinary world, as if they drew their breath from some different, purer atmosphere. She watched for a moment as his lips curved into a cynical smile, as he listened to the obsequious praises of his guests. Within the walls of his castle he held the position of king, and all those present were his subjects. The orchestra began to play a soft tango, a nostalgic melody that made Sofia's heart ache. It was his father's favorite song. He was fond of saying that tango wasn't a dance, but rather a duel of the souls, a hushed conversation between two bodies. On those rainy afternoons, in the living room of their old house, he was the one who taught her how to dance, and he would laugh heartily when she stumbled and tripped over her own feet. With the greatest difficulty, Sofia suppressed a stubbornly persistent tear. She swallowed it down along with a significant feeling of pride. Crying was a luxury she could no longer afford. In her way to the kitchen to get another bottle of sack, she came across the group Alejandro was among, and she passed them. Isabella's voice, sharp as broken glass, reached his ears. "Alejandro, darling, look at this. People lacking the most basic level of class, utterly unsuitable for such an exclusive event. That one over there," she said, indicating Sofia with a dismissive shake of her head. "From what she looks like, She seems like she's never seen a crystal glass in all her life. I'm afraid she'll spill it all over my dress." The laughter that followed was cruel. Sophia stopped. Her back stiffened. She felt the group's gazes burning into her skin. She could have ignored it, walked on, and pretended she hadn't heard. That would have been a service market. Old Sophia, daughter of the late Ricardo Alenka, a man who had imbued her with a strong sense of dignity above all else, found it impossible to remain silent. To Sophia's surprise, Alejandro did not laugh. His gaze met hers for just a fleeting moment, and she noticed something in his eyes. Not pity, but instead, a cold, almost analytical curiosity. It was as if he approached her as a mathematical problem he was determined to solve. He did not defend her, but neither did he approve of the mockery. He simply watched, unmoved. It was this indifference that hurt the most. What one could anticipate was Isabella's cruelty, but Alejandro's silence functioned as a kind of complicity. The intense tango music permeated the air, a dramatic and passionate sound that resonated strongly, a crazily insane idea, fueled by the potent mix of grief, humiliation, and a profound yearning for her father, took shape in Sophia's mind at that very moment. A spark of rebellion ignited in his eyes. She turned, no longer a shadow but a presence. His resolute placement of the tray on a nearby table produced a quiet clatter, and this subtle act, far from going unnoticed, immediately drew a considerable amount of attention. She walked towards the group with measured, confident steps. The murmuring died down. All eyes, including Alejandro's, were on her now. Isabella studied him intently from head to toe, a mocking grin playing on her lips. "Have you lost something, darling? The staff area is in the kitchen." Sophia ignored her completely. His gaze was fixed on Alejandro. The orchestra seemed to be playing just for her at that moment. "From Montenegro," she said in a clear and firm voice, without a trace of hesitation. He raised one eyebrow, a slight but perceptible movement, which was the first genuine indication of his interest that evening. "Yes." His voice was deep and authoritative. "I overheard their conversation," Sophia continued, her voice trembling slightly. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a rapid, frantic rhythm mirroring the adrenaline surging through her. "It appeared that you and your guests held the firm conviction that individuals like myself are out of place in this refined atmosphere, that we lack the necessary class, talent, and soul." A shocked silence descended upon the room, thick and palpable. The guests, initially engrossed in their own conversations, suddenly perked up, their attention drawn to the unexpected confrontation brewing between Sophia, Isabella, and Alejandro. Isabella's face contorted with furious indignation. "How dare you, Alejandro?" she shrieked, her voice laced with venom. "Expel this insolent girl immediately." But Alejandro, with a subtle but effective hand gesture, silently ordered Isabella to remain silent, his gaze never wavering from Sophia. His eyes, however, reflected a more complex emotion, a dangerous spark, a potent blend of irritation and a captivating, almost magnetic fascination. "And what do you suggest?" he asked in a tone that bordered on mockery. "Are you trying to teach me a lesson in good manners?" With a small, slightly defiant smile playing on her lips, Sophia answered, "No. I'd like to make you a bet." The sneering expression on Alejandro's lips morphed into a smile radiating sheer arrogance. He inclined his head slightly, his movements reminiscent of a predatory animal intently watching its prey. "A bet? And what could a servicewoman bet me? Her tip for the evening?" The group laughed, a sound that quickly evaporated when Sophia didn't retreat. Her unwavering stance silenced them entirely. She declared, "I'll stake my dignity," her voice echoing against the heavy silence that had descended. "If I can, in this moment, dance this tango with you and demonstrate that my passion and soul surpass those of all the women in your acquaintance, then you will have no choice but to confess, before everyone present, that you have made a mistake." Alejandro Rio responded with a short, dry, humorless laugh. "Do you want to dance the tango with me?" said he, sounding as if the suggestion was the most ridiculous thing ever devised. He looked down at her feet, which were shod in simple, black work boots. "You probably don't know the steps." At that moment, Isabella saw an opportunity to publicly humiliate Sophia and whispered something in Alejandro's ear. He heard her, and his smile became crueler, more cutting. He sat up straight and took on the appearance of a high court judge. "Okay, I'll take your bet," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. "But bets have to be more interesting." He looked her up and down. His eyes lingered upon her uniform, her hands calloused from the hard work she had done. He wanted to humiliate her. to destroy that spark of defiance he saw in her. Provided that you dance a truly impressive tango, right here, right now, I will certainly do a better job next time. He paused dramatically. His smug smile widened. I'm going to marry you. A collective outcry went through the room. It was a magnificent and utterly absurd mockery, making the message clear to everyone. He was putting her in her place and showing her that the distance between them was as great as the proposal was ridiculous. The humiliation would be perfect. She would make a fool of herself on the dance floor, and he would dismiss her with a laugh. Isabella smiled triumphantly. It was perfect. But to everyone's surprise, especially Alexandra's, Sophia did not relent. Her eyes shone with resolute determination. The fear had vanished, replaced by cold fury. She realized he anticipated that she would flee, that she would shrink back and lower her head before the public ridicule. He had, however, touched something sacred, the tango itself, a tangible link to her father. I suppose so, she responded, her voice possessing the clear, resonant quality of a bell. Yet if I win, I want neither your name nor your money. I want the settlement of the debts owing to the clinic where my mother receives treatment. I demand that you settle the cost of her entire treatment, right to the very last cent. For the first time that night, Alejandro Montenegro's facade crumbled. He stared at her, truly surprised. This wasn't about vanity or an idle impulse. There was a depth to it that he had not foreseen. Still, backing down was now impossible. He was caught in the snare of his own arrogance. As you wish, he said, his voice slightly strained. Prepare yourself for the greatest humiliation of your life. With a formal, mocking gesture, he offered his hand. Sophia met him, her bearing unwavering. The orchestra, acutely aware of the changing atmosphere, abruptly ceased the delicate music that had filled the hall. The conductor, visibly puzzled, turned to Alejandro, who responded with an imperious nod. Play Larcita, he ordered, with everything you've got. The first chords of the world's most famous and dramatic tango resonated through the hall. The sound held within it a promise of passion, confrontation, and ultimately, tragedy. Sophia placed her hand in his. The electric current that flowed between them was instantaneous and shocking. His hand was large and warm, and it encircled hers tightly. The weight of his other hand rested firmly on her back, a possessive touch that left her speechless, completely taken aback. For a moment, the outside world disappeared. The only thing left was the music, the comforting warmth of his touch, and the undeniable challenge evident in his eyes. He expected her to be stiff and awkward. He was planning on taking her for a ride, exposing her lack of ability, and then letting her go. However, when he made the first move, she didn't follow him as a subordinate. Instead, she accompanied him as a partner. Their bodies moved together as if they had been rehearsing for years. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, letting all the memories of her father, all the lessons, every laughter, run through her mind. She wasn't dancing for Alejandro. She was dancing for her father, for her mother, for her own lost soul. The first turn was fluid, perfect. Alejandro's expression betrayed a subtle surprise, though Sophia could sense it very clearly in the firm pressure of his hand. He responded with a more complex step, a cortado, a move characterized by its intricate precision, and she, far from simply mimicking it, infused it with her own unique flair, a subtle yet proud turn of the head, leaving him momentarily speechless. The sparkle in her eyes began to melt, replaced by a wonder he hadn't felt in years. Who was this woman? The room was completely silent. The guests, expecting a light-hearted comedy, were now unexpectedly witnessing a powerful work of art. Sophia was not only technically perfect, she danced with raw, overwhelming emotion. Every step was a story. The longing, the pain, the anger, the hope, it was all there. Her body language was telling. From every graceful turn to each intense gaze she offered him, she was no longer the market, he was no longer the millionaire. On this dance floor, they were equals. Two passionate fighters, two passionate lovers, two souls engaged in a feverish dialogue. Alejandro's leadership, at first dominant and arrogant, began to change. He abandoned his efforts to control her and started to listen to her. Gradually, the dance changed from a show of power to a beautiful, heartfelt duet. Instead of looking delicate, she turned, as if she were soaring through the air, before landing gently back in his embrace, stronger than ever before. Her legs entwined with his in a precise, sensual hook, and the intensity of their physical contact so intimate and charged with electricity, sent Alexandros' heart racing wildly. He could feel her warmth through the thin fabric of her uniform, the soft lavender scent of her hair, her breathless breath close to his face. He lost himself in those eyes. Those eyes, once seemingly dull and submissive, now burned with a ferocious fire, a burning intensity that threatened to engulf everything in its path. The frozen mask, worn for so long, cracked and splintered, revealing a man whose very existence he had unconsciously suppressed, a man he had long forgotten. The music reached its climax, dramatic and powerful. As if moved by a sudden, inexplicable impulse, Alejandro leaned back in a dramatically sweeping final pose. His body hovered over hers, their faces inches apart. His hands, which had previously held the glass of whiskey indifferently, now held her as if she were the most precious thing in his life. As their breath mixed in the air, her scent intoxicated him. A captivating blend of the hard-earned results of her honest work and her undeniable feminine charm. He could feel a heart beating wildly against his hands, or maybe it was his own heart that he felt. He hesitated for a long, tense moment, wanting to kiss her. He wanted to kiss this impertinent maid in front of all of high society, in front of Isabella, and to hell with the consequences. The force of his desire, so intense and primal, was something that terrified him. The lingering note of the music finally faded, leaving behind an atmosphere of profound and crushing silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then, Alejandro slowly brought her back upright. He didn't let go of her. His hands still lay upon her, and his gaze remained fixed on her, striving to unravel the intricate puzzle she personified. The enchantment was shattered by a sound, a solitary clap, followed by another and another until the whole room burst into a resounding ovation. The people weren't just applauding a dance, they were applauding the courage, the talent, and the pure emotion they had witnessed. Sophia finally looked away, a blush rising to her cheeks as she realized what she had done. With the adrenaline beginning to fade, it was replaced by the intense, uncontrollable shaking of my body. Suddenly finding herself alone, she disengaged from Alejandro, acutely aware of her newly exposed and vulnerable state. He saw her go, watched her leave, and felt an inexplicable, unexplainable sense of loss. His eyes swept across the room, lingering on Isabella, whose face was distorted into a mask of profound anger and overwhelming disbelief. The triumph he had expected to see in her eyes was not there. Instead, he felt only disgust at her pettiness. His gaze returned to Sophia, who was now standing against the wall, trying to make herself invisible again. But it was too late. Everyone had seen it now. She had won. The bet, the thought hit him like a blow. "I will marry you." This absurd sentence, spoken with such utter contempt, now lingered in the air, hanging heavy like an irrefutable, inescapable promise. But she had changed the terms. The way he treated his mother, a wave of respect, something Alejandro rarely felt, washed over him. She sought nothing personal. Her intentions were solely altruistic. With a slight nod to his security detail, he methodically pushed his way through the throng, completely ignoring their questions and the many curious, inquisitive stares. He had to talk to her, had to understand. He found her in the hallway that led to the kitchen. She leaned against the wall, her eyes closed, and took a deep breath, as if trying to calm herself. "Sophia," he said. It felt odd, almost foreign, to hear her name on his lips. Until this point, he'd been completely unaware of her existence, let alone her name. He'd had to resort to asking a security guard for information. She blinked, surprised by his attention. "Mr. Montenegro," he began hesitantly, his words faltering slightly. The man accustomed to concluding billions-dollar deals with a single, decisive statement was strangely unable to articulate his purpose. Finally, he managed to mention her mother's debts, his voice roughened with emotion, considerably lower than usual. "Consider them settled," quote, he confirmed, a stark contrast to his usual authoritative demeanor. "Please provide me with the name of the clinic and all necessary details. My assistant will handle everything promptly tomorrow morning. Your mother will receive the highest standard of medical care possible, the very best that money can procure." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but this time, they flowed from a heart brimming with relief and deep gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered in a shaky voice. "Thank you very much." "Please, don't thank me," he said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with his own generous actions. "It was a bet I lost." He observed her as she struggled to conceal her emotions, the resilience that shone through even in her vulnerability. Intense curiosity seized him. He inquired, Where did you learn to dance in such a captivating style? She responded softly. My father taught me. He loved tango. At the mention of his father, a subtle shadow of sadness momentarily crossed his usually cheerful face. There was an irrational impulse in Alejandro to banish that shadow, to drive it away. The hallway door opened and Isabella's shrill voice echoed through the hallway. Alejandro, what are you doing here with her? Everyone is talking about it. You humiliated her, like you promised. Alejandro then turned towards Isabella, and for the first time he saw her truly as she was, small, envious, and ugly inside. The beauty which once drew him in now looked like nothing but an empty form, a hollow facade. Hush, Isabella, he said. His voice as cold and detached as artist's own. The only one who's been made to feel humiliated here tonight is you. He turned back to Sophia. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. You are no longer a servant in this house. Starting tomorrow, you will work directly for me as my personal assistant. Sophia and Isabella gasped at the same time. What? They said in unison. Are you crazy, Alejandro? Isabella screamed. She's nothing. What will people think? I couldn't care less what people think, he answered, his gaze locking onto Sophia. Her performance this evening has demonstrably shown that she possesses more courage, integrity, and unyielding passion than any other person in this room. And precisely those qualities are what I want beside me. He made an impulsive but logical decision, something which was entirely at odds with his character, but something inside him, something that their dance had awakened, refused to let her return to the shadows. Mr. Montenegro? Sophia started, her voice trembling with disbelief as she reacted to the unexpected twist. I have no idea how to be an assistant. You'll learn, he interrupted. Your salary will be 10 times what you're making now. You'll have everything you need to take care of your mother and start your life over. The only condition is that you never hide again. The woman I saw on that dance floor wasn't born to serve. She was born to shine. He approached her, ignoring Isabella's anger. He stood so close she could feel the warmth of his body. His voice dropped to a whisper that only she could hear, a familiar, dangerous tone that sent shivers down her spine. And Sophia, he said, his breath warm against her ear, the marriage part is still open. With nary another word, he turned and headed back to the ballroom. He left behind an Isabella boiling with wrath, and a completely shocked Sophia, her heart pounding wildly, and the absurd and sensual promise of a millionaire ringing in her ears. The night, which should have been his demise, had just morphed into the start of something far more intricate and perilous than mere tango. The morning light penetrated Sophia's modest room like an unwanted interloper. She had not slept. Every centimeter of her body ached from the tension of the previous night. But her mind was where the real battle was taking place. The images repeated themselves endlessly. The mocking smile on Alejandro's face, the weight of his hand on her back, the shock in his eyes as she danced, the promise to care for her mother, the absurd job offer, and lastly, that hazardous, intimate whisper that still sent goosebumps down her spine. The part about marriage, it haunted her relentlessly, is still open. She sat up in bed. The thin blanket slipped from her shoulders. Was it real, or had she dreamed it all? A feverish fantasy born of exhaustion and despair. An envelope slid under his door answered his question. His name was written in a bold, elegant hand. With trembling hands, she opened it. Within was a credit card, featuring a credit limit so staggering that it left her quite speechless, and a simple note, "Be at Montenegro Corp. at 9 a.m. sharp. A car will be waiting for you at 8 a.m. Buy yourself some proper clothing. Consider this a down payment." Ah, reality slammed into her with the force of a devastating blow. It was true. His life had somehow changed overnight. An hour later, Sophia, dressed in her best clothes, which still seemed inadequate to her, entered the most expensive department store in town. The saleswomen regarded her with a look of outright contempt and were poised to remove her from the store until she displayed her platinum credit card. The attitude changed instantly. Fake smiles, and suddenly she was a young lady. Sophia felt a bitter taste in her mouth. That was just the way the world worked. Respect was not earned, it was bought. For the occasion, she chose a dark gray dress featuring a high neckline, paired with a lovely white silk blouse and elegant, low-heeled shoes. Clothing which conveyed a level of competence she felt was far beyond her own capabilities. When she looked in the mirror, gay, she saw a stranger, a woman who seemed to belong in Alejandro's world, but whose eyes still reflected the panic of the girl who had served canapés the night before. The car, which was a black limousine with tinted windows, arrived precisely on time. The driver, a man with serious features, opened the door for her without a word. The ride into the heart of the financial district was a whirlwind of glass and steel skyscrapers. Perched atop one of these titans, Antiope embodied the sheer power and unbridled ambition of a man determined to leave his mark. Entering the lobby was like entering another universe. The marble gleamed. The silence was only interrupted by a few moments, occasionally broken by the subtle click of expensive heels and the gentle murmur of everyday activity. Everyone moved purposefully, exuding confidence and success. Sophia felt like a fraud. With a slight stammer, she gave her name at the reception desk. The receptionist, a woman of flawless blonde beauty, raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Sophia Alenka, Mr. Montenegro, was waiting for her. From the manner in which she expressed it, it was clear that Sophia was an anomaly in that environment. She was ushered into a private elevator which ascended in swift, silent majesty, directly transporting her to the top floor of the building, Alejandro Montenegro's sanctuary. The door opened into an office that was larger than the entire apartment Sophia lived in. One entire wall was made of glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. The decor was minimalist, modern, and obviously very expensive. And there he was seated, behind a large, dark mahogany desk. His eyes scanned her from top to bottom. His expression was unreadable. "You're 5 minutes late." That was the first thing he said. His voice was as cold as the setup. The car was stuck in traffic. "Sir?" she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Traffic is a predictable variable. Next time, leave earlier. Sit down." Sophia perched on the edge of the chair, her bag clutched tightly in her lap. The silence that followed was oppressive. He continued working on his computer, deliberately ignoring her and letting her stew in her nervousness. Every second seemed like an hour to her. Finally, he looked up. "Sophia, if you work for me, the first rule you must remember is this: incompetence. The second rule is, I demand absolute loyalty. Rule number 3, and it's extremely important, never waste my time." He stood up and walked with his back to her window. "It will be your task to filter every aspect of my life. My emails, my calls, my schedule. You will know all my secrets. Every business deal, every weakness of my enemies. If a single word of what you see or hear in this office leaves this office, I will punish it," destroying her in such a way that the financial ruin of her family almost seems like a holiday. The threat hung cold and real in the air. Sophia swallowed hard. "I see, sir." "Great," he said, and turned away. He slowly moved toward her desk, his hands then resting heavily upon it, subtly but undeniably intruding upon her own private space. So close he was, she could see the faint lines around his eyes and the subtle scent of his perfume, an expensive blend of sandalwood and power. "You've proven you can be brave. Now you're proving it can be useful." His predecessor was fired for arranging 2 scheduling conflicts. "As your initial assignment, you're required to completely reorganize my schedule for next week. She's a disaster. The files are on the computer. You have 2 hours. He straightened and walked to a side door. "I'll be in a meeting. Don't disturb me. Unless the building is ablaze. And even then, they'll think twice before acting." With that, he left her alone. Sophia glanced at the computer screen. The schedule was a nightmare of color-coded positions and cryptic notes. It sounded like a foreign language. Panic rose within her. She didn't know where to begin. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of the reason for her being here. Her mother. He drew the strength he needed from the image of his mother, frail and pale, lying in the hospital bed. She would not fail. It could not fail. She threw herself into the task with focus and determination. She used logic, compared email archives, and slowly began to unravel the chaos. The work was intense and required complete concentration. She lost track of time. Suddenly the door opened and Alejandro returned. He glanced at the clock on the wall. Their time is up. He then went over to her desk and, with a slight lean, glanced over her shoulder at the computer screen. She held her breath, waiting for the verdict. He held his tongue for a full minute, his eyes meticulously scanning every detail present. The silence was agonizing. "You have canceled my meeting with Phoenix Corp," he said in a neutral voice. "Yes, sir," Sophia replied with a sinking heart. It had been canceled the day before, an oversight on the part of their previous assistant. "I rescheduled it for Friday, before our lunch with the Japanese investors, given that both meetings concern the Asian merger. I figured holding them sequentially would be more efficient." He continued to observe the screen, specifically noting my scheduled lunch with the senator. "I decided to convert that lunch into a dinner appointment." A quick review of her file revealed that her husband is celebrating a birthday this week, and she had hoped to spend lunch with him. An invitation for dinner, therefore, demonstrated a thoughtful consideration for her personal schedule, potentially influencing her to be in a more receptive mood regarding the building permits, she explained, somewhat taken aback by the bold decision she had just made. Alejandro finally pushed his chair away from the table and met her gaze. A new, brighter light now shone in his eyes. It wasn't quite admiration yet, but it clearly reflected a developing, genuine interest. "How did you obtain information concerning the senator's husband?" The article providing that information appeared in a gossip magazine located in the senator's in-flight entertainment library. "I figured they were there for a reason." Alejandro twisted his mouth into something that almost looked like a smile. "Not bad, Sophia? Not bad for a dancer." The mention of dancing made her blush. The intimacy of this evening seemed a world away from the stereotypical atmosphere of the office. "Now," he continued, returning to his full professionalism, "prepare a summary of the Kairos project. I need it within the hour." That was how the rest of the day and the week went. Alejandro relentlessly pushed for her, giving her impossible tasks with deadlines that were completely absurd. He was demanding, impatient, and rarely praised her. But slowly, a rhythm developed between them. Sophia came to understand and anticipate his needs. To interpret his emotional state from subtle cues, such as the clenching of his teeth or the rhythmic tapping of his fingers against the table. He in turn began to place his trust in her and to delegate increasingly important tasks to her. Moments of tension emerged, which were not linked to any aspect of the work whatsoever. Sometimes, when he leaned over her to look at a document, his hand would brush against hers and an electric current would run through them, or their eyes would meet over. With their attention focused on the computer screen, a moment of profound intimacy arrived. In that instant, all the formality evaporated, and they became once more the man and woman dancing on the floor, locked in a silent yet passionate and sensual duel. In those moments, Sophia felt a heat flood through her body and quickly looked away to focus on her work and hide her flushed face. Alejandro, she noticed, seemed affected as well. He became gruff. His voice dropped in pitch and he recoiled sharply, as though the physical contact were a burning sensation. On the Friday after the first week, the calm was shattered by the arrival of a hurricane called Isabella was Canelos. She stormed into the office unannounced, completely ignoring Sophia and going straight to Alejandro, who was on the phone. "Alejandro, my darling, I've missed you so much," she announced, her voice echoing slightly as she caressed his chest with her hands. Alejandro abruptly ended the phone call, his face a picture of irritation. "Isabella, what brings you here?" "I'm working." "Oh, don't be such a pest," she retorted, pursing her lips in a pout. His eyes then caught sight of Sophia, and his expression shifted rapidly to one of outright disdain. "What's she doing here? You wouldn't dare tell me you gave this insignificant little nobody a job, would you? I thought it was just some kind of misguided joke to get her out of your hair." "Sophia is my new personal assistant," Alejandro stated, his voice dangerously calm. He distanced himself from Isabella, a move that didn't go unnoticed. "And she's extremely competent," he added, emphasizing his choice. "Isabella Ryu, assistant." The name itself struck a discordant note. "Alejandro, please, consider what people will think. Everyone at this party is discussing your somewhat unusual philanthropic endeavors. You're being made to look foolish. You're becoming the laughingstock. I don't care what people think. Alejandro retorted. His gaze hardened, becoming as cold and unreadable as polished ice. Sophia remained silent, keenly aware of Isabella's venomous words, yet resolute in her refusal to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She continued to type, maintaining the facade of deep concentration on her work. Isabella pivoted, directing her attention to Sophia. So Ibi, the little girl from the market, is now playing the role of secretary. Let me guess her duties. It probably involves fetching coffee and making sure the boss's bed is nice and warm before he gets in. Her words, barely audible, were a venomous hiss, intended solely for Sophia's ears. The insult was brutal, a swift blow to her self-esteem. Sophia stopped typing. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, suspended in midair as if poised to strike. Anger, a hot fire, was rapidly escalating within her. Throat open, hot and bitter, she lifted her eyes to meet Isabella's burning gaze. As part of my duties, Sophia stated in a voice that was both cool and tightly controlled, it falls to me to ensure that Mr. Montenegro's precious time is not frittered away by irrelevant interruptions or the demands of desperate celebrities. You have a prearranged meeting. Isabella's face flushed crimson with anger, but before she could complete her statement, Alejandro's voice, sharp and cutting, sliced through the air like a whip. Enough, Isabella. He walked directly over to Sophia, positioning himself beside her chair, and placed his hand gently, but protectively on the back of her chair. The significance of this gesture did not escape the notice of either woman. Sophia's performance perfectly matches the expectations outlined, and she executes her duties with exceptional skill. If you have nothing further to discuss, the door is right over there. Humiliated and burning with rage, Isabella hurled a glance at Sophia, a look that clearly promised revenge. You will pay dearly for this, Alejandro. And, she declared, her finger trembling slightly as she pointed at Sophia, you won't remain here for much longer. With those words, she turned and departed, slamming the door behind her in a fit of fury. The silence that lingered was thick with tension. Only then did Sophia finally exhale, unaware that she had been holding her breath all along. I'm sorry, sir, she said. I shouldn't have done that. You didn't do anything wrong, he interrupted her, his voice now softer. He was still standing beside her. His closeness was both comforting and unsettling. You did that perfectly. He left, going back to his desk, and with that, the special moment of connection they had shared was now finished. Back to work. But something had changed. The seemingly insignificant gesture, that act of defending her and standing alongside her against someone from her immediate environment, woven a new thread into the intricate and complex tapestry of their relationship. He saw her as more than just a household employee or a secretary. He perceived her as someone special, someone worthy of his protection. In the days that followed, Sophia sensed the change. Alejandro began incorporating her into high-level meetings, not only to take notes, but also to actively solicit her opinion and contribute to the discussion. Leveraging the intuition she had clearly inherited from her father, a remarkably talented businessman, she began offering insights that came as quite a surprise to everyone, including Alejandro. She was not only efficient, she was also smart. That evening, they worked tirelessly, well into the night, to complete the proposal for a highly influential Arab investor. Out there, the city glowed. A shimmering galaxy of light spread out beneath him. The office was silent, except for the sound of their keyboards tapping. Let's take a break, Alejandro said suddenly, rubbing his hands. I'm hungry. What would you like to eat? Sophia was surprised. Everything's fine with me, sir. For goodness sake, Sophia, please stop calling me sir when we are alone. With a slightly irritated edge to his voice, he stated, My name is Alejandro. He then reached for the phone and ordered Chinese food from an upscale restaurant. As they waited for their order, a different kind of silence enveloped them. A silence far less tense and considerably more pleasant than the preceding unease. Do you remember me? His? Who? Alejandro asked, looking at her. And she replied, My father, the words forming on her lips. He had the same intensity, the same dedication to his work. He loved building things, doing business. Would he have liked her? Alejandro listened quietly, his attention fixed on her. She discussed the ascent and decline of her family, the illness her mother faced, and the burden of pain and responsibility that she carried. She was, for the very first time, not merely a housekeeper or an assistant, she was Sophia, a woman possessing a rich and compelling history. As she concluded her statement, he remained silent for a moment, allowing himself time to process the information. He finally spoke, his voice grave. Your father, he stated, was a godly man. By taking control of his fortune, I wronged his memory. It was a business transaction, nothing personal, but my approach could have been far better. The confession stunned her, leaving her breathless. It came as close to an apology as she had ever anticipated from him. What happened to them? Why are you like this? He looked out over the city. His expression darkened again. Trust is a virtue of fools, Sophia. I was betrayed by the people I trusted the most. My mentor tried to steal my company. The woman I thought I loved sold him information. I learned the hard way that in the end, you can only rely on yourself. With the meal now served, the intensity of the moment was briefly interrupted. They ate in silence, yet the distance between them was now filled with a newfound understanding. They were two survivors, profoundly marked by loss and betrayal, though to a very different extent. The significant meeting with Marco Vega, a competitive businessman renowned for his charisma and aggressive business strategies, was scheduled to take place the following week. Marco made an attempt to take over a technology company that Alexandro very much wanted. It was a clash of the titans. Marco is a shark. Alejandro warned Sophia as they prepared. He uses his charm as a weapon. Don't be fooled. When Marco Vega entered the conference room, Sophia understood what Alejandro meant. He had a certain olive-toned attractiveness to him, characterized by a bright white smile and eyes that seemed to gaze directly into your soul. He extended a firm hand to Alejandro, accompanying it with a smile that fell short of reaching his eyes. But when he turned to Sophia, his smile became genuine. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he asked, "And who might this beautiful asset be to the Montenegro team?" Then, he gently took Sophia's hand, giving it a light kiss, maintaining her gaze. Sophia introduced herself as Sofia Alencar, Mr. Montenegro's assistant, and quickly pulled her hand back because the level of familiarity was unsettling to her. "Ah, the famous Sophia," Marco said, smiling even wider. "The rumor about you has already reached us. I've been told that in addition to managing your schedule, you also possess the ability to dance a captivating tango." Sophia's face flushed red. The story had indeed made its way around. She glanced at Leandro, observing how his jaw became clenched, his eyes turning cold and unreadable. The meeting started, and the tension within the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marco and Alejandro launched into a vigorous debate of numbers and projections, each one striving to dominate the other. However, throughout the entire proceedings, Marco consistently addressed his comments to Sophia. "Sophia, given your remarkable intellect, what are your thoughts on this growth forecast?" He continued, subtly praising her apparent elegance and experience. "And Miss Alencar, with her inherent sophistication, surely you recognize the equal importance of a product's aesthetic appeal and its functional aspects." It was a calculated maneuver, designed to destabilize Alejandro, and it proved remarkably effective. His responses became shorter, his demeanor noticeably more irritable and increasingly frustrated. The coup de grace arrived when the meeting finally concluded. Marcus got up and, rather than addressing Alejandro directly, he approached Sophia, leaving his partner to grapple with the fallout. "It was a pleasure, Sophia. Would you perhaps permit me the opportunity to invite her to dinner at some point, so that we may discuss subjects considerably more interesting than mergers and acquisitions?" Before Sophia could respond, Alejandro's voice cut through the air, deep and deadly. "Mrs. Allen's schedule is full, and she's not having dinner with the competition." Marco Rio, Alejandro's protector. "I didn't know you had this side. That makes things much more interesting." He winked at Sophia and left the room. Alejandro immediately turned to her after the door shut, his face revealing an expression of carefully controlled fury. "What was that?" he asked, a slight shudder passing through his body. "I didn't do anything," Sophia defended herself, shocked by the intensity of his anger. "He was flirting with me, not the other way around. And you liked it, didn't you?" "Watch your compliments," he accused her, taking a step toward her. "You don't know who Marco Vega is. He would use her and then discard her to get what he wants. And you're different," she replied, her anger now replacing her shock. "You hired me on a whim after you humiliated me. Don't pretend to care about me." "I don't pretend to," he growled, taking a step closer. He shoved her against the large glass window, placing a hand on each side of her head and holding her tight. The city stretched out below them like a toy. His body was inches from hers, radiating heat and fury. "Do you think I don't care?" I couldn't focus on a single word that idiot said because all I could think about was, it was impossible to stop thinking about the way he looked at you, the way he touched your hand, and the way you blushed when he mentioned the possibility of dancing. Sophia's heart was pounding wildly. His anger had nothing to do with business. It was jealousy. Raw, primal, crushing jealousy. "You're my assistant," he whispered. His voice was hoarse now with another emotion. "You embody my essence. Yet on that fateful tango night, your presence transcended mere representation. You were something beyond, and you are aware of that undeniable truth." He leaned close, his face so near that their lips seemed about to meet. "The dress you're wearing today. I could barely concentrate on my work anymore. You move around this office like you belong here. Everyone, from the newest intern to the highest-ranking executive, will turn to look at you. Do you think I don't see it? Do you really think I like this, Alejandro?" She whispered, her anger slowly dissolving, giving way to a turbulent mix of confusion and simmering desire. "I really hate the way he looked at you," he admitted. His forehead brushed hers. "The reason is, I want to look at you in the same way I look at you when I suspect you aren't paying attention." And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle or tender kiss. This kiss spoke of possessiveness, of simmering frustration, of a desire repressed for far too long. It was hungry, demanding. His lips crashed against hers, and she gasped. For a moment she pondered the option of pulling away and fighting against his overbearing dominance. Yet then, a wave of her own, long-held, pent-up desire unexpectedly overwhelmed her. The potent attraction that had simmered beneath the surface since their initial encounter on the dance floor erupted into a blazing explosion of passion. Reaching for his hair, her hands plunged into it, clenching tightly and pulling with a force that echoed his own untamed nature. As she opened her mouth to him, the kiss deepened, evolving into a spirited dance of tongues. It matched the intensity and passion of the tango that had brought them together. Releasing his grip on the window, his hand moved to her back, drawing her closely to him. In that embrace, every distance between them simply vanished. She felt the powerful muscles in his chest, the rapid, frantic beat of his heart, and the unmistakable evidence of his intense desire against her hip. It was a shocking, terrifying, and yet incredibly exciting experience, the most she'd ever felt. When they finally pulled apart, they were both panting. Their lips were swollen and red. They stared at each other. The palpable shock of that moment hung heavy in the electrified air between them. The previously clear-cut line between boss and assistant, between the millionaire and his former employee, had been irretrievably erased. They were in new territory, dangerous and unfamiliar, unsure whether what had just happened was the beginning of everything or the beginning of the end. The echo of the slamming doors echoed through the vast office like the starting gun for a race. Neither of them knew how to run. Alejandro stood at the window, staring out at the city without really seeing it. His knuckles were white where he gripped the windowsill. He still felt a tingle on his lips from her taste, a delicious fusion of coffee and mint, topped with an utterly irresistible sweetness that was distinctly Garopia. He was experiencing a tumultuous whirlwind of emotions, a complex and conflicting mix. There was the consuming rage Marco Veger had ignited within him, juxtaposed with the overwhelming triumph of finally holding her in his arms. And, chillingly, there was the paralyzing panic born from the actions he had just taken. He had broken all his rules. Beyond the strict prohibition against relationships with female employees, there was also his overarching principle, never allowing anyone to become intimately close to him. And Sophia, she hadn't just gotten close to him, she had broken through his defenses, as if she had never existed. It wasn't just a physical act of desire. The kiss represented a far deeper surrender. He'd succumbed to something that had been steadily building within him, ever since he first witnessed her bold defiance in the ballroom. He wanted her, not just in his bed, a situation that would have been simple and manageable, but in a much more complex and, frankly, frightening way. He sought out her sharp intellect, her silent strength, the manner in which her eyes shone with brilliance when successfully addressing a complex problem. He desired her stubbornness, the very spark he'd witnessed in her the moment she defied Isabella, and wanted it preserved. A sudden ring on his desk phone startled him, pulling him abruptly from his contemplative state. It was his head of security. "Sir, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but Isabella Wasconos is currently in the lobby and is behaving rather dramatically. She insists on going upstairs. I should call the police." Alejandro closed his eyes. A headache throbbed in his temples. He wouldn't let it happen. "I'll take care of it." He was aware that he needed to put an end to this, once and for all. At the same time, Sophia was standing in the women's restroom, holding onto the cold marble wash basin with both hands and working to control her breathing. Looking at herself, she saw a stranger's face. Her lips plump, her cheeks rosy, her eyes shining, wide open as if captivated. An unfamiliar beauty now, a mixture of fear and excitement. What the hell had just happened? That kiss had been quite unlike the gentle, hesitant kisses she'd shared with her old college sweetheart, vastly different indeed. This kiss had been like a firestorm. A storm. He had utterly taken possession of her, possessed her completely, and a terrified part of her had loved every single second. She touched her lips and felt the reverberation of his mouth on hers. He wanted her, and God help her, she wanted him too. The physical attraction was undeniable, an undercurrent that had flowed between them from the beginning. Yet during these past few days, something deeper had begun to take shape, developed. She had caught a glimpse of the man behind the iron mask. The surprising vulnerability as he spoke of his betrayal. Noticed the nearly affectionate manner in which he listened to her father's story, and the genuine respect evident in his eyes when she presented a good idea. Alejandro Montenegro wasn't simply the arrogant billionaire who had humiliated her. He was something far more complex. Despite his complicated, wounded, and brilliant nature, he possessed an incredibly passionate inner self beneath a cold exterior. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was falling in love with him. The prospect was far more unsettling than his outburst or the kiss itself. Entangling oneself with a man of Alejandro's character, it was unavoidable. The outcome could only be heartbreak. He wasn't a man for relationships, but a man who wanted to control everything. What kind of feelings would he experience once the intensity of the moment had finally faded away? Regret. To maintain the delicate equilibrium of his meticulously crafted universe, he would have no choice but to fire her. With a cold splash of water to her face, she immediately felt the shocking sensation, which quickly brought her thinking back to focus. She couldn't afford to lose control. She needed her job. Her mother depended on it. Taking renewed resolve to heart, she stood upright, smoothed her hair, and went out of the bathroom, willing to meet whatever the future might hold for her. She would be professional. She would pretend nothing had happened. When she returned to her desk, Isabella was standing in front of Alejandro's desk, her face flushed with anger. After all that we've been through together, Alejandro, you can't just fire me like that, you know? Isabella's voice was shrill and desperate. Alejandro stood behind his desk, unfazed. Unfazed, Isabella. What existed between us was a convenient arrangement, nothing more. We were never exclusive, and you know it. That was in front of her, Isabella screamed, pointing an accusing finger at Sophia as she entered the room. She turned him against me, that dirty, money-hungry girl. Do you really think she cares about you? She just wants your money, you idiot. Sophia stopped and felt all eyes on her. The accusation hit her like a blow. Money was the last thing on his mind. Isabella, enough? Alejandro said in a dangerously low voice. You're making a fool of yourself. I'm making a fool of myself. And you? Are you trading a woman of your station for scum? What would your father say if he were still alive? The reputation of the Montenegro family is being dragged through the mud because of her whim for that tango dancer. Get out of here immediately, Alejandro ordered. His face darkened with anger. My security guards will escort you out. Two-toned men emerged from the hallway. Isabella looked from Alejandro to Sophia. Her eyes sparkled mischievously. This isn't over yet. You're both going to regret this, she hissed before being escorted out. An awkward silence filled the office. Sophia stood there, not knowing what to do or say. Alejandro ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of confusion. I'm sorry, Sophia, he said, sounding genuinely tired. You didn't have to watch that scene. Okay, she muttered. The professional moment she had planned seemed ridiculous now. How could you ignore what was about to happen? Or the scene that was currently playing out? He walked around the table and approached her. Every step he took made her heart race. He stopped right in front of her, his eyes intense. You were wrong about everything, he said quietly, except for one thing. What? I know it's because of you, she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, revealing the underlying emotion. And yes, Everything changed the moment you entered this office. He slowly reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. The touch was light, almost hesitant, yet it sent a shockwave of heat through her body, leaving her completely breathless. I'm utterly baffled, Sophia. I simply cannot comprehend what is happening between us. The mere thought of another man touching you in the way Marco Vega did earlier today drives me to the verge of madness. And when you returned my kiss, he took a deep breath, his throat working. I lost all control I believed I possessed. The choice of words, "You kissed me back," was not insignificant. It was his way of acknowledging the shared responsibility, of recognizing the intensity and mutual nature of that unexpected kiss. I'm utterly lost, Alejandro, she admitted, her voice trembling even further. This is a terrible mistake. I am, after all, your employee. He spoke, then added, "Quit," his voice deep and raspy, a clear and deliberate challenge. I can't do that, Mother. I will take care of your mother. What happens between us is irrelevant. My promise to you regarding her health remains unwavering and absolutely binding. Consider it settled forever. The immense relief that overwhelmed her was so intense that it almost caused her to faint. In just a few words, the heavy burden, the overwhelming weight she had carried with her each and every day, was lifted from her shoulders. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Because for the first time in a long time, I want something that money can't buy, he said, his eyes dark and serious. I'm curious to see if there's something genuine between us. He leaned forward and kissed her again, this time without anger or possessiveness. The kiss was deep, searching, full of raw emotion that took her breath away. Wrapping her hands gently around his neck, she succumbed to the feeling, letting herself be swept away by the unspoken promise forming between them. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I honestly don't know how to do this right, Sophia. I certainly don't have any contacts, but for you, I'm ready to give it a try. The sincerity in his voice disarmed her last defenses. She acknowledged, I have no idea how to do this, but continued, I still want to give it a try. The transformation was remarkable. A slow, genuine smile, the first she'd ever witnessed, blossomed across Alejandro's face, softening his already strong features. He suggested, well then, how about we start tonight in a place where we're completely unknown? Instead of the extravagant experience one might expect, he led her away from the glitz and glamour of a five-star restaurant, opting instead for a smaller, more intimate venue, a true gem. This hidden treasure, a small, authentic tango club, lay nestled within the charming old streets of a historic neighborhood. The atmosphere was thick with the intoxicating blend of darkness and vibrancy. A live band, their passion undeniable, poured out music that captivated the room. They found a quiet corner at a table towards the back and, finally, simply spoke. He shared stories from his childhood, a childhood marked by loneliness, a life lived under the relentless shadow of a demanding father who constantly pressured him to achieve excellence. She, in turn, shared the ambitions she nurtured before the devastating economic loss that befell her family, her fervent dream of opening an art gallery. Laughter intertwined with the shared vulnerability of their fears, and as the music swelled, punctuated by the poignant melody of La Comchita, he stood, extending his hand towards her. Grant me this dance, Miss Alenka? Surrounded by the dim lights of the dance floor and the faces of strangers, they found their way back to each other. The dance was different this time, less of a duel and more of a conversation. It was tender, intimate. Every single step and every single turn served as a powerful affirmation of the blooming affection between them. When the song ended, he held her in his arms in the middle of the dance floor and whispered in her ear, Sophia, I know it's crazy. It's true, we've only just met, yet I have this deep-seated feeling as if I've been waiting for you my whole life. Toward the end of the night, he walked her home to his quite modest and simple little apartment. He walked her to the door, and for a moment, tension hung in the air. It remained unspoken, this question of whether he would enter. Yet he proceeded to kiss her softly and gently. I want to do this right, Sophia, slowly. He then turned and walked away, leaving her behind with a heart brimming with a hope that felt distinctly dangerous. The next few days were like a dream. They worked side by side in the office, exchanging furtive glances and stealthy touches that were more electrifying than any public kiss. And at night they explored the city, went to the movies, les jeux, strolled through parks, and had dinner together. Alejandro transformed before her eyes. Replacing the cold and unscrupulous manager was a man who possessed a warm, humorous, and surprisingly attentive nature. He visited Sophia's mother with her and spoke to her. His respect and kindness touched her so deeply that they brought tears to her eyes. He carefully listened to her stories about her husband, Ricardo Alenka, and made a solemn promise. His legacy would be honored and cherished, but he also acknowledged the lingering shadows, the remnants of their past lives, which had yet to fade completely. Isabella's revenge came in the form of poisonous rumors in the media. The tabloid press headlines shouted about Tycoon Montenegro and his housekeeper, who seemed like a Cinderella. A fairy tale, just a hit from the trunk. Paparazzi photos of them were everywhere. The depiction of the dance and the bet was slanted, leading to Sofia being represented as a manipulative and ambitious social climber, while Alejandro was portrayed as an excessively lovesick individual. In the office, the atmosphere changed. Sofia could feel the whispers and the glances behind her back. Certain people showed her obsequious deference, while others treated her with disguised contempt. His personal and professional lives had become so intertwined that the separation became impossible. The hardest blow, however, came from an unexpected source. Following the loss of the technology business to Leandro, Marco Veger decided to retaliate with a more personal approach. He deliberately released to the press manipulated financial figures intended to create the impression that Montenegro Corporate faced financial difficulties and that Alejandro's romantic relationship was impairing his business acumen. The company's stock plummeted. The board called an emergency meeting. The pressure on Alejandro was enormous. Sofia saw him retreating into his old shell. He distanced himself from others, lost in thought, spending countless sleepless nights in the office, meticulously reviewing spreadsheets and reports. Tenderness gave way to tension. "Maybe it would be best if we gave each other some space for a while," he said one evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Voice, we're distracting me, and I can't let that happen." Those words stabbed her like a knife. "Distracting me? Am I that to you?" she asked, sadness clearly audible in her voice. "Sofia, I didn't mean that at all," he said, running his hands across his face in a gesture of frustration. She faced reality. "The value of my company is plummeting. My managers believe that I have completely lost my mind, and the media is relentless in its destruction of us. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm a nahar, because for the first time in my life I'm feeling real emotions," she retorted. "Alejandro, please, don't let them do this to us. Don't let the venom of individuals like Isabella and the machinations of men like Marco destroy the only good thing that has ever happened to you. And how are we supposed to fight this? Alejandro, please, don't let them do this to us. Don't let the venom of individuals like Isabella and the machinations of men like Marco destroy the only good thing that has ever happened to you. And how are we supposed to fight this?" he inquired, his voice betraying an uncommon despair. "They're exploiting you, using you as a pawn to get to me. They're deliberately damaging your reputation." "Well then, we fought together," she said, gently but firmly holding his face in her hands, compelling him to meet her gaze. "You have taught me the importance of not hiding. I will certainly not start doing so now. You are the wisest and strongest man I have ever encountered. Utilize your brilliant intellect to fight. Don't conceal yourself behind barriers of ice and allow me to assist you." With eyes full of unshakable trust, her gaze appeared to penetrate his steel armor. He saw in her not a weakness or a distraction, but his greatest strength. He held her close in a warm embrace, letting his face rest against the comforting scent of her hair. "I'm sorry, you're right." As the situation unfolded, it became clear to Sofia that her actions needed to extend beyond simply providing moral support. She had to prove her worth, not just to the world, but to herself. She was no helpless virgin waiting to be rescued. She was the daughter of Ricardo Alenka, and the blood of a businessman ran through her veins. As Alejandro was getting ready for the tense board meeting, Sofia started her own investigation into the matter. Drawing on the research expertise she had gained during her time as his assistant, she embarked on a thorough investigation of Marco Vega's financial affairs. Sleepless nights fueled by coffee and unshakable determination were spent carefully comparing public records, news articles, and investor reports. Finally, a small discrepancy, a loose thread, was discovered. She pulled on it, and Marco Vega's entire house of cards began to crumble. In her investigation, she discovered a pattern of market manipulation, shell companies, and fraudulent transactions. Marco wasn't just a shark, he was a criminal. Working throughout the entire night, she meticulously compiled a complete dossier, assembling irrefutable evidence to create a concise and highly compelling presentation. On the morning of the council meeting, as Alexandra was putting on his suit of armor for battle, Sophia placed a USB stick in his hand. "What is this?" he asked. "This is your ammunition," she said. Her smile, a mixture of weariness and triumph. "Fight, not in a defensive manner, but aggressively. Let them see who you truly are, and let them see who I am." Having become curious and completely trusting her, he accepted the USB stick. The meeting was brutal. The board members, older, conservative men, relentlessly questioned him about his conduct, his irresponsible relationship, and the dramatic fall in the company's stock price. He listened patiently, maintaining his composure despite the intense pressure. Once they had finished questioning him, he calmly stood up. Rather than defending himself personally or elaborating on his relationship with Sophia, he simply inserted the USB drive into the projector. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice calm and authoritative, "you are concerned about the temporary 2% dip in the stock price, a fluctuation caused by malicious rumors. I want to present you with a real opportunity, a chance to capitalize on this situation." He then proceeded to present Sophia's findings, thoroughly exposing Marco Vega's fraudulent activities. He meticulously demonstrated how Montenegro Corpia could leverage this information to acquire Vega's assets at a fraction of their true value, should the scandal inevitably come to light. In effect, he turned a personal attack into a remarkably astute and ultimately successful business strategy. The previously hostile atmosphere within the boardroom abruptly shifted. A murmur of excited discussion erupted, replaced the previous criticism with admiration and a growing appreciation for his innovative thinking and courageous actions. "This analysis is brilliant, Alejandro," the chairman said. "Who discovered this?" Alejandro looked over at Sophia. He smiled. "My partner," he said, and the word hung heavy in the air, full of the significance of their remarkable achievement. Sophia Alenka and the brilliant website she developed had just netted them hundreds of millions of dollars. The financial news outlets erupted that night, celebrating Alejandro Montenegro's strategic genius and detailing the imminent downfall of Marco Vega. Montenegro Corp's stock price soared, reflecting this newfound success. The whispers about the Cinderella housekeeper, once so prominent, were swiftly replaced by articles proclaiming the dazzling brilliance and substantial wealth of Montenegro Corp. Alejandro returned to the office, where Sophia awaited him, her face alight with anticipation. Without a word, he crossed the room, gently lifting her into his arms and spinning her happily around, their success evident in their shared joy. "We did it," he said, laughing. With a joy she had never heard before. She responded, "No, Alejandro, you managed it all by yourself. I merely provided the card." Her voice filled with pride and love. He disagreed. "You are mistaken," he said, releasing her but continuing to hold her firmly. "You serve as my map, my compass." I kissed her then. A kiss brimming with thanks, relief, and a profound love, both now fully acknowledged. They were no longer simply a boss and an assistant, a millionaire and a protege. Instead, they were genuine partners. "Sophia, marry me?" he whispered at her lips. It wasn't a joking bet in a packed dance hall. It was a true plea from the heart of a man who had at last come to love. "Marry me, be my partner, my wife, everything to me. Wish me the rest of our lives?" Tears of happiness welled in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." At this moment, perched atop the world with the city sprawling below, they realized that the hardest part of their journey had ended. However, a fresh challenge was already visible on the horizon. It involved building a life together, bridging their two very different worlds. Uniting them, in this case, would produce the most intricate tango they'd ever have to perform. This secret, which Sophia hadn't yet disclosed to him, a small thing she'd been keeping locked away within herself for 2 weeks, was about to introduce an entirely new and unexpected element into the carefully choreographed dance of their lives. Her hands touched her abdomen softly, a cryptic smile playing upon her lips. Their tango would soon become a trio. The engagement announcement of Alejandro Montenegro and Sophia Alencar caused a tremendous sensation in the glamorous high society scene. Some responded to the story with a romantic fascination, while others reacted with a hidden cynicism. Nonetheless, no one could dispute the story's power. Through her exceptional intelligence and unwavering courage, the former employee successfully won the heart of the city's most coveted tycoon and, in doing so, simultaneously averted a devastating assault on his company. Sophia was no longer Cinderella. She was Queen Midas, a woman whose mere presence seemed to possess the magical ability to turn everything she touched into gold. The transition, however, was not without its challenges. Moving into Alejandro's to inhabit this minimalist penthouse, a fortress built of glass, steel, and featuring the latest technological innovations, felt like moving to another planet. This space, which had been designed for a man who maintained a safe distance from the world, was gradually beginning to transform. Sophia, with her warm demeanor and instinct for coziness, breathed life into the place. Art books began to appear on the previously empty coffee tables. Over time, the inviting scent of freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread gradually eclipsed the air conditioning's typical, stale smell, while verdant plants had the effect of mellowing the architecture, strong, sharp lines. To his own surprise, Alejandro loved any change. To come home meant returning, not to a tranquil haven of quietude, but to a vibrant, lively home. A place filled with the delightful sound of Sophia's laughter and the gentle music playing softly. But this wasn't the only news. It was a different piece of information, the secret Sophia guarded. Something that would truly change everything. She chose the right time to tell him. It was a quiet Sunday evening. She and her family had recently returned from a visit to her mother, who, thanks to cutting-edge medical treatments and the joy of seeing her daughter well, was experiencing remarkable progress in her recovery. They were seated on the sofa. Sophia's feet were resting on Alejandro's lap, and he was giving them a gentle massage. The city glittered beneath them like a carpet of diamonds. Alejandro began, her heart beating a little faster. "I need to tell you something." He looked up, his eyes immediately concerned. "Is everything okay, your mother?" "She's fine. We're fine." She reassured him. "It's a good thing. I think it's wonderful. But it's a big deal. And it's going to change everything." Curiosity replaced the concern in his eyes. He finished massaging her and turned his full attention towards her. Sophia took a deep breath, took his hand, and placed it gently on her belly. Her whispered words, "Our tango will soon have a third dancer," stunned Alejandro into complete silence. He remained utterly still, his gaze shifting from his hand, which rested gently on hers, back to her face. His mind struggled desperately to grasp the meaning of what she had just said. He opened his mouth, ready to respond, but found that no words would emerge. Panic began to bubble in Sophia's chest. Maybe it was too soon. Possibly. A man just beginning to learn the ropes of a relationship might not have been ready for the responsibility of fatherhood. The silence stretched on, becoming heavy and suffocating. "You are," he finally managed to say hoarsely, "pregnant." She felt her eyes water with uncertainty. "I am in the 2nd month of my pregnancy. I found out about it just before the Marco Vegas scandal became public." A flood of emotions flashed across his face. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then something Sophia had never seen before. A vulnerability so profoundly raw and incredibly deep that it left her holding her breath. Tears formed in the corners of her dark eyes. He whispered the words, "A baby," and the word itself sounded wonderfully strange on his lips. "We're having a baby." He slid off the couch, knelt down in front of her, and placed both hands on her belly with a reverence that moved her to the core. He rested his forehead against hers. "Sophia, what I've just heard is the most terrifying and yet unbelievably amazing thing I've ever encountered in my life." He raised his gaze, and the smile he offered her wasn't the self-assured smile of a tycoon or a powerful boss, but rather a smile born of genuine awe and respect. "I am going to be a father." In that moment, all of Sophia's doubts vanished. This was the true Alejandro, the man she loved, completely without any disguise. The news of the pregnancy accelerated the wedding plans. They did not want a media spectacle, but an intimate celebration of love and the new life they were creating. The wedding was held in the gardens of Sophia's parents' former house, a property Alejandro had quietly purchased and meticulously restored as a secret, heartfelt wedding gift for her. It was a very small and intimate ceremony, attended only by the closest friends and family. Sophia's mother, who was in a wheelchair but beaming with happiness, held her daughter's hand throughout the ceremony. During his vows, Alejandro didn't bring up any matters concerning business or his wealth. He recounted how Sophia had transformed his drab life, infusing it with vibrant color and passionate emotion, and how she had patiently taught him to trust and love once more. "You didn't just dance the tango with me, Sophia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You danced your way into my soul and awakened it. I promise to spend the rest of my life being the partner you deserve in this dance." Sophia, with tears of happiness streaming down her face, uttered her own vows, promising to be his secure and loving refuge, his faithful partner in every battle and every celebration, and to love him with an unwavering and unconditional heart. Married life brought a new harmony to their lives. Alejandro, who once held the belief that work was the only thing that truly mattered, began to leave the office at an earlier time. He faithfully accompanied Sofia to each and every prenatal checkup appointment, captivated by the grainy ultrasound images and melting completely within when he heard his son's heartbeat. He took on an almost comically protective role, insisting she carry nothing heavier than a handbag, and he promptly stocked the pantry with every healthy food item he'd learned about from the pregnancy books. Sofia, on the other hand, blossomed. Released from the heavy burden of financial and emotional stress that had previously weighed her down, she once again discovered her passionate love for art. Using Alejandro's assistance, she started organizing the opening of the art gallery, which he'd always wished he had. He observed her working, fascinated by her passion and her knowledge, and he saw in her the same brilliant businesswoman his father had been. Shortly thereafter, a healthy baby boy, Ricardo Alencar Montenegro, graced the world, possessing his father's dark hair and his mother's remarkably expressive eyes. Holding his son in his arms for the first time was the most formative experience of Alejandro's life. In this little being, he saw a future he had never dared to dream of. Our future, a time filled with laughter, sleepless nights, the joy of first steps, and those first precious words, a legacy of love, not just wealth. Little Rick, as they called him, cemented their family. Sofia looked on, brimming with genuine happiness, as Alejandro, the notorious predator of the business world, underwent a transformation, becoming a doting father, now lying on the floor, contorting his face in silly expressions for his little boy, or pacing back and forth in their penthouse at 3 a.m., baby safely on his shoulder, crooning odd and quite unusual lullabies. They became a team, navigating the challenges of parenthood with love and humor. Together, they learned to change diapers, soothe crying babies, and celebrate every little milestone. The dark shadows, those persistent specters that had haunted their past, now seemed like distant memories, faded and diminished by the bright light of their newfound happiness. Isabella had moved to Europe and, after a series of minor scandals, had disappeared from the pages of society. Marco Vega was facing a long legal battle. His reputation was in ruins. The world, the same one that had sought their destruction, had evolved and subsequently discovered new stories capable of devouring them. Sofia found herself sitting in the office of her art gallery several years later. It had become one of the most respected and prominent galleries in the city, and this afternoon she was meticulously finalizing all the details for her upcoming new exhibition. Rick, now a curious 3-year-old, was playing with building blocks on the carpet. As the door swung open, Alejandro entered, his arms laden with a vibrant bouquet of red roses. "For my wife." "Brilliant," he said, kissing her. "They call you a fresh perspective on contemporary art, a true innovator. They call you a new perspective on contemporary art. Aren't you jealous that I'm stealing the show?" she joked. "Never," he said. "Seriously, seeing you shine is the greatest achievement of my life." Rick ran to him and Alejandro picked him up. "Daddy, can we dance?" From the office stereo, an old tango song, the same melody that had united them on their first fateful night, softly began to play. Alejandro, a smile playing on his lips, looked at Sofia. He carefully placed his son, Rick, upon his shoulders and extended his hand to his wife. "Give me this dance, Miss Montenegro," he requested with a gentle but firm tone. Sofia, her laughter echoing in the beautifully curated art gallery, took his hand. Surrounded by the stunning artwork, a testament to her dreams and aspirations, she danced the tango with the man who had, in the past, subjected her to humiliation, yet now cherished her with profound affection. Their movements on the dance floor were fluid and effortlessly synchronized, their steps practiced and familiar. It was no longer a contest, a mere pastime, or even a romantic gesture. It was a celebration, a vibrant affirmation of second chances, of an unconventional family, and of a love that began with a spirited defiance and gradually blossomed into a truly beautiful and enduring partnership. As the music concluded, Alejandro, in a dramatic and unforgettable finale mirroring their first dance, gently tipped Sofia backward. But this time, his gaze, instead of conveying a hint of defiance or resistance, reflected only an infinite and profound love. "I love you, Sofia," he whispered. "Things that words cannot truly convey." With the tiny hands of Rika clapping enthusiastically, They shared a kiss, a sealed vow of a life shared in dance, laughter, and unwavering love. The tale of Alejandro and Sofia serves as a powerful reminder. The essence of a family isn't defined by traditions or a family name, but by the deep well of unconditional love and the profound respect they show each other. If you found this video meaningful, your support means the world. You'll find the Pix key for donations in the comments section. These donations help us continue creating stories and support my family in our endeavors. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel to stay updated on future content. Your support keeps us going.